politician. You got my brothers in the prison. My mama said it's going missing. I know I don't condone crime, but I told my front time we were designed for this system. Boom, we got the planes in the sky now. What am I spraying now? Chemicals.
Shalom, shalom. Just getting a couple of things set up, waiting for some people to come in.
So how they gonna solve it? Fluoride in the water, reducing cancer, new world order. This is the new world order. This is the new world order. Fluoride in the water, fluoride in the water, fluoride in the water. Reproducing cancer, reproducing cancer. Yo, boom. So now you got cancer. You gotta fight that with radiation. Another NHS mission. Money for the corporation. Police are still killing the innocent. Greedy banks still making millions. For my people suffering.
Why are my people suffering?
Dutty, Stinkin, Bablyon, give out your time. Now it's time to let my people go. Let my people go. Moses went to Pharaoh, told him, let my people go. Let my people go. Let my people go. Hey,
You've had your time. This is for the enemy, y'all.
the time is gone.
Running out. Tell them come on in, enjoy that. Hey, the sound of judgment now. Be bold, be strong and stand firm. What's up, guys? So, I'm gonna get this started. Let people come in as they come. We already know this kind of thing cuts off in an hour. I'm trying to get through a lot here, so. Shalom, guys. Shalom. Tag anybody that you think can, benefit from this type of message. I want to just go ahead and get into this because this is something that plagues our whole community. Whether we're a man, whether we're a woman, whether we're a child, even if you're not in our physical community, you are plagued by this topic as you see it on the news, as you see it happen around you, and people are in a state of confusion. People don't know what to do, what they should do, who should be the protector. Is there a protector? So this is a topic that we need to discuss, and not discuss from a place of opinion, but discuss from a place of knowledge. Because so often do we come from a place of complaint about things not going right and from a place of frustration. But we need to, instead of coming from a place of frustration and complaint, come from a place of knowledge so that we can then restore what it is that we're complaining about. So that's the first thing. So this is obviously a really, really important topic to me as a woman of melanin complexion, or a black woman as people would say in this country. This is something that we all wonder what to do about. So let's just address it. Black women unprotected in America. Now, the biggest thing when we're looking at this topic is the root. I was always told as a kid that if you have a problem, you need to get to the root of it. You need to get to the base. So what is the root of what we're talking about? What is the subject? Which is protection. So what does it look like to be protected? What is protection? And who is a protector? These are definitions that we think we know. But what I tend to find in our society is that we tend to ask for things or demand things without a clear-cut idea of what it is we're asking for. So if we're asking to be protected, what does that mean? What does that look like? What is a successful picture of what it looks like to be protected? So let's start off with understanding what those things mean in their basic fundamental definitions, okay? So I'm going to actually use the Webster Dictionary. We all know what the Webster Dictionary is. There's all different sources that we can look for this information. I'm going to use the Webster just because this is something that everybody knows and everybody can go on their phone and go to. So when we look at the word protection or protect, or what that means, it literally says in its first conjunction to cover, to shield from exposure, so something that is exposed, from injury, damage, or destruction. A guard, defend. That's the first thing. The second definition of protection is to maintain the status or integrity of a maintain the status or integrity, especially through financial or legal guarantee, i.e. to save from contingent financial loss, or to shelter or foster from infringement or restriction due to finance. So in both definitions, we see that it's a shield or a cover, a defense, a guard from some type of exposure, whether it be financial, physical. So if we're looking at protection, who then is a protector, right? Because that's the typical, that would just be ABC of what we are talking about. So if now we have the definition of a protection, a protector, by again the Webster definition, is one who protects. So right here we have in this definition that it is a person, not a thing. So a person protects, right? Okay. These are things that we all say we know, yet we are so confused on this topic. So it needs to be discussed. So a person protects, A. B, a device used to prevent from injury or guard. 2, one having the care of the kingdom during a king's monarch. So this is protection in a monarch or a nation type of way. So a government type of protection versus a singularity type of protection. And in that it goes into the execution of the head. So a leader, right? So we're getting down to the character of a protector, right? They're a leader. They can prevent injury. They have financial gain that can then protect you from outside forces, right? So now we know what a protector is, and now we know what protection itself is. Now here's the key. Who needs protection? What is the protected party? What does that look like? Okay. And again, I'm using the Webster Dictionary. We could all look this up. We could all find it ourselves and do the same research. Okay, so it says for protected, the protected party is preserved from harm. So this person or party is the exposed, and that's actually another synonym that we have here for protection, or excuse me, protected. It is the exposed party, the guarded party, or the one that is being taken care of, right? So in order to be taken care of, there needs to be some type of relinquishment of independency. There needs to be a dependable state in order to be taken care of, correct? Okay, so another word that we also see here synonymous with that is shelter. A person that is defended, a person that needs security. That is what a person that needs protection is. So if you need security, if you need preservation, if you are exposed, then clearly there needs to be someone that you are underneath or submitting to that is going to provide you with that protection. If that's the case, then the independency is irrelevant, correct? Because we don't want to be independent yet protected. And I think that is where there is a lot of confusion, because we're asking to be protected, but in the same token, are we in the state of needing protection? And are we worthy of that protection? And are we going to allow that protection? It's the biggest thing. A lot of people, especially women, are probably not going to like what I'm saying right now. But it's the truth. And we have to take accountability. And we have to see where we contribute to this before we ask for outside help. So if we're asking as women to be protected, meaning guarded, meaning restricted, meaning sheltered from exposure, then there's clearly an exposure to threat that we are worried about, right? That we can't defend. So if that's the case, then there's a level of submission that needs to happen, a way of response in order for someone to protect you. And we can just make this simple by saying, if you're an independent woman and you don't need a man, then where does that man come in to protect you? So we just need to be careful about the way that we're phrasing things. Because on one token, we can sit here and say, I'm an independent woman, I make $100,000 a year, I don't need a man, I can take care of myself, but then look around and say, hey, there's no man to protect me. So there's a huge disconnect there. Huge disconnect. And then we have the men not understanding how to protect the women because they have the women telling them they don't need them and telling them they're independent. So if I was a man, I would assume that means you got it. What else does that tell me? You got it. If you're independent, if you're secure, you don't need me, you make this much money, what do you need me to protect you from, right? So this is why there is a back and forth. This is why men feel that they are at a loss of where to go, and why women feel constantly frustrated that their men are not protecting them. So in the current state, let's look at how the structure is set up now that we got that. So who are the current protectors in our society now that we have all those definitions? In our American society, we have the stereotype of the authority of the white man. We tend to look at the police or a judge, a lawyer, any form of authority as a white male. And we tend to look at strength as a black woman. So you constantly hear those stereotypes, the strong black woman and the white policeman, right? But where does that then leave the black man? And where does that then leave the white woman? There's a reason for that. Okay, so when we look at the nation as a nation, our protectors are the government, the police, the judges, the people that we have chosen to put in authority. When we look at our community, and I'm speaking of our Melanin community, who are the leaders in our community right now? Really, who are the leaders? They're women. It's women. Women have the high-paying jobs. Women rule the world. Women are the ones in politics. Women are the ones passing the laws and agendas. And we constantly even hear it in our normal speech. You know, we hear it in our pop culture where we hear songs like "I Think God Is a Woman," or we hear "Single Ladies" and "All My Independent," all this. So we run the world, girls, right? Right? So we can't then fall back and want to run the world, but then say it's the man's fault that we're in this condition. We all have to take our accountability. This is why I started this off by saying some women are not going to like what I'm saying. When I get into it, some men are not going to like what I'm saying. But this is not opinion. This is going to come from fact, and I'm going to show you several places of information in our history that proves and also perpetuated this notion and this idea. So right now, we have elevated our black woman to this state of almost the same equality as the white male, where she has the same voice in politics, she has the same financial security, and we have reduced the black male to barely having a job, barely being able to maintain a job, not being able to take care of, and the stereotype that you already assume he's not going to do those things. So where we have now turned the leaders of our community into the black women, and the authority of our nation and our community to the male, white male. where does that leave our black men that we are saying is not protecting us? We need to really, really look at the picture, honestly. So often do we have things like a domestic dispute. So often can it be an argument between your girlfriend, a boyfriend, a husband, a wife, whatever. We could be having a verbal altercation, and we know each other, but we feel the need to call an outside source who doesn't know us, who isn't from our life or our walk, who comes in with guns, and then asks them to break up what we're talking about. Okay, let's really marinate on that, because we're sitting here and we're saying we're not protected, but the only source of protection that we have literally used with all of us is the police. So we're constantly using the police as our protective authority, and we are having conflict with each other and having an outside source who we all say, and we all know 9 times out of 10, if a dispute happens in a black neighborhood, it isn't usually a black officer responding to it. So you're bringing someone who isn't from your lifestyle, who already is a threat to you, who you already see as an oppressive figure, into your private space to then break up a situation between you and your spouse that you could have figured out on your own with guns. And then you're surprised that one ends up dead or one ends up in jail. And then you're left unprotected, whether it's the male or the female. So there is plenty of reason for this. And yes, we have ourselves to blame in the sense that we should have been asking these questions. And we should have been getting to the root of this. Because had we asked these questions a lot sooner, rather than constantly blame each other, we may have learned a little quicker where this came from. I digress. There's reasons why we didn't look into it. And there's reasons why it's successful at its rate. So I just want to show you guys a few pieces of information that I have researched. First one is the Willie Lynch letters. Don't know if you ever heard of Willie Lynch. Willie Lynch was a British slave owner from the West Indies, in which America took a lot of his policies and implemented them into America. We all recognize that last name because that's something very synonymous with us as Americans, lynching. It does come from his name. It does come from his policies. So this book, actually, Making of a Slave, is the letters that he actually wrote and the speech that he gave in Virginia in 1712. The reason I'm bringing this up is because in this document and in these letters, he not only describes how to make and break a slave, but he also describes how to mentally make and break our community, both male and female, and not how to do it just as a slave, but how to perpetually make and break our community for generations to come. So if you haven't heard about this, I highly recommend getting the Willie Lynch letters. It's a very short read. You can see it right here. It's like a pamphlet. I'm not going to go all the way into it because I'm going to probably do a separate video because there's some really deep stuff in here, all the way up into making the Negro slave, breaking the male down, breaking the nigger woman, nigger marriage. Excuse my language, but that's literally what it says. And it really gets deep. So I'll probably do a separate video just attacking this book. But I really just want to get into breaking the process of an African American woman. Reason being, this whole subject of protection versus unprotection derives from this man's letters in this country. Our cornerstone of how we have created not only our slave society, but how they would then function after slavery comes from this man's letters. So please, I implore you all to start educating yourself and start coming from a place of opinion and figure out where our root problems are. So I'm going to just read really quickly, and it's very short, his excerpt, excuse me, I'm a little warm, his excerpt letter about making a slave. Now, this speech was delivered on the James River of the colony of West Virginia in 1712. So we're talking well over 300 years ago, okay? Like I said, he was a British slave owner in the West Indies. He had a colony, and he coined the name or phrase lynching. So we already got an idea what kind of person this was. He made this speech on December 25th of 1712. That date is very significant, December 25th. And we'll talk about that at all. No, that's a whole other topic. But he decided to make this speech on the banks of the river, and he starts off by saying, I greet you here on the banks of the James River, in the year the Lord 1712. First, I shall thank you, the gentlemen of the colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I am here to help you solve your problems with slaves. Your invitation reached out to me on my modest plantation in the West Indies, where I have experimented with some of the newest and oldest methods of control of slaves. Even ancient Rome would envy my use of our program implemented. So he even goes in to make a joke about this. And I'm just going to show you the lettering. It's pretty big lettering. It's such a very short read, so I really recommend you guys get this. In this letter, he goes on to say, the black slave, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry it on and will become self-refueling, self-generating for hundreds and hundreds of years, maybe thousands. Don't forget, you must pitch. Now listen to this part. Because when I read this, I was like, oh my God, this is insane. So he goes, don't forget, you must pitch the old black male against the young black male. The young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slave against the light-skinned slave, and the light-skinned slave against the dark-skinned slave. You must use the female against male. I actually just want you guys to see this as I'm reading it. How about I do that? Yeah. Okay, so it says there, you must put the female against the male. So this isn't something that we came up with on our own, people. This is 1712. Okay? We didn't decide to come up with this on our own. This is 1712. Okay? So you must put the male against the female. And you must put the female against the male. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks. Okay? So right here, they're sitting here and telling you that not only are they going to pin the young against the old, and the old against the young, and light against dark, and black against man against woman, but they're also saying, while they're going to make us all go against each other, they're going to make sure that they make all distrust you. So you're going to fight with each other, and then everybody's going to be against you at the same time. Okay, that was necessary. And it says it's necessary that your slave trust and depend on you solely, the white man. So as they're pinning each other, male against female, they only look to the white man for help. Right here in black and white. This is what they say. This is their words. Okay. They must love and respect and trust only us. Take this in, people. Okay? Gentlemen, these kits are your keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. It literally says that. Okay? If you use intently for 1 year, the slave themselves will remain in perpetual distrust of each other. So in this letter alone, he describes not only how we're going to go male against female, female against male, light against dark, dark against light, old against young, and young against old, but he also describes in this letter how we are only going to trust the white male and the white man for authority figure, love them and look for them for help and support, and have all of them distrust us. So we constantly are feuding with each other. Does that sound like what's going on today in society? So I know I started off a lot of this stuff that sound a little bit controversial, but now you see where it comes from. Okay? So their whole idea was to pin us against each other from the beginning. Because keeping us fighting with each other doesn't allow us to look at them. Doesn't allow us to look at the oppressor as the problem and go to the oppressor for a way for help. Okay? So that was just his introduction letter. That wasn't even getting in to what I came to the book to show you. Okay? So I'm just going to skip ahead to the process of breaking an African American woman. And I'm going to read this part in its entirety. It's 2 pages. It's not a very long read. This is why, guys, I recommend you guys, you can read. I read this whole book in like 30 minutes. So this is something you guys can read on the train, going to work, on a break, anything. And it will make a whole difference in your life and the way you're looking at things versus a constant state of confusion. So the process of breaking down an African American woman. Okay. So let's get into this. Take the woman and run a series of tests on her to see if she will submit to your desires and willingness. Okay? Test her in every way because she is the most important factor to economic goods. This is referring to the black man. This is, referring to the black woman being the most important factor of economic goods. If she shows any sign of resistance in submitting completely to your will, you being the white man, do not hesitate to bullwhip her on abstract get that last bit of resistance out of her. So again, he's stating here that the black woman is the important factor to the white economic status. Get her to submit to him as the white man, but if she doesn't submit, as it says here, quote, beat her until she gets that last bit of resistance out. We see that with things like Sandra Bland and other situations. So as in the beginning, they're telling us to pin ourselves against each other. In this segment, they're telling us to depend on the white man for submission. Okay. Take care not to kill her. Now, this is if she doesn't submit to you as a white man. Take care not to kill her, for in doing so, you will spoil good economy. She's for good economic use. When in complete submission, she will train her offspring in the years to come to submit to labor when they become of age. So by breaking her, she breaks her children. That is what Willie Lynch was trying to say. Okay? Understanding that is the best thing, and he literally says that because he wanted these white slave owners to know, you really got to put your attention on the black woman. You really need to make her understand that she's special, that she's going to be the one to be the head of the house and make the money, and that her kids need to listen to her because she did this, not thinking about the fact that this was given to her so that she would stay in this perpetual state. So digressing, it says, therefore, we shall go deeper into this area of subject matter concerning what we have produced here in breaking the process of a female nigger. We have reversed the relationship in her natural, uncivilized state. She would have a strong dependency on the uncivilized nigger. So they took us from having a dependency on a civilized man to an into a dependency on an uncivilized man. He goes on to say, the black nigger woman, she will have a limited protection tendency toward her independent male offspring and will raise her male offspring to be dependable like her. And basically what that's saying is, because she's so dependent on this white man and this money and this state of authority, she's going to teach her man to be dependent on him rather than teach her man to be independent. So if she's teaching her man to be a man, where's the father? Right? I continue. Or excuse me, if she's teaching her child, her son to be a man, then where's the father? Right? So nature had provided for these type of balances, and it literally said that. Nature had provided for these type of balances because nature provided for the man to be the protector and the woman to be the protected. So they understood by removing that, you would then now reverse the roles. So we're going to reverse, and it says that, we're going to reverse nature by burning and pulling a civilized nigger apart and bullwhipping him to the point of death in her presence. So they would take a strong black man, the strongest in the town. They would usually take the strongest in the town and make an example of him, of ripping him apart. Literally, and what they mean by doing that is they would tie each extremity, arm, leg, to a bull or a horse and kick that horse and bull and let them run and rip this man apart right in front of this woman. So you can imagine what that's doing to her. One, seeing that he can't protect himself, and now seeing that she's left alone. Okay? So by leaving her alone, unprotected, I'm going back to the reading, it says, by leaving her alone and unprotected with the male image destroyed, the ordeal causes her to move from her psychological dependent state on him, which we saw was a natural balance, to a, and it's quotes, frozen independent state. In this frozen psychological state of independence, she will raise her males and her female offspring in reverse role. So here, ladies and gentlemen, in the book of Willie Lynch, the man who created and coined the name lynching our people, do we see where they teach how we're going to be one against each other, male against female, how we're going to be reversing our children's roles from feminine to masculine, and how we're going to put the black woman in a frozen state of independence. So all you single ladies and all you independent ladies, thank Willie Lynch. For the fear of the young male's life, she will psychologically train him to be mentally weak, independent, but physically strong. Is that something that we see in our community today? Do we see a lot of men that are physically strong, but psychologically and mentally weak? Because she has become psychologically independent, she will train her female offspring to become psychologically independent. Didn't come from you. Didn't come from your mama. Didn't come from your friends and the community and all. It came from Willie Lynch. Open up your eyes, people. It came from Willie Lynch. Okay? So after she then trains her daughters to become in a frozen state of psychological independence, what have you got? And it literally says, what have you got? You've got a nigger woman out front and a nigger man behind her and scared. This is a perfect situation of a sound sleep economic system. Before this breaking process, we had to be on alert at all time. I just want to put this here so you guys can see that I'm not making any of this up. And this is coming straight from the book. This book is created in 1712. Okay? So they've been for 300 years using this book as a method and a way to control our people. They knew prior to this our black man was too strong. They knew prior to this mentally, not physically. He was strong enough that he would defend his wife, that he would defend his family, that he would die willingly for his family. But by killing him, and him not even having the option to decide if I'm going to defend my family or not, and then by putting her in a perpetual state of frozen independence, you have an unprotected source. And then you have a woman then training her children to become unprotected sources. They knew they couldn't beat you before this. They knew they could not beat you before this. They needed to break you down to do this. So while you're blaming each other, they don't have to worry about you fighting them. They don't have to worry about you running off the slave plantation or running away from them now. You're going to fight each other. Okay? We're going to keep going. It says, now we can sleep soundly. You guys can see that? Now we can sleep soundly. Right there. Okay? For out of the frozen fear, his woman stands guard for us. This is the woman that's in charge of Black Lives Matter. This is the woman that's running for mayor. This is the woman that's Kamala Harris. This is the woman that's now standing with a white man. Okay? Just saying. You don't like how that sounds? It is what it is. I didn't write it. Willie did. Okay? It says, now that we can sleep soundly, for out of the frozen fear of his woman standing guard for us, he cannot pass her early slave molding process. He is a good tool, now ready to be tied to a horse at a tender age. By the time the nigger boy reaches the age of 16, he is soundly broken and ready for a life of sound and efficient work and and a unit of good labor force. So by the age of 16, now that he's broken, all he wants to do is work. He's not going to fight anymore. He's not going to be running away anymore. He's not going to be trying to be the man anymore. Now he realizes, I just got to fall back and work. Okay? Continually through the breaking of the uncivilized savage nigger, by throwing the nigger female savage into a frozen psychological state of independence, by killing the protective male image, and by creating a submissive, independent mind of a nigger slave, we have created an orbiting cycle that turns on its axis forever. Unless and it goes into say, unless a phenomenon occurs and reshifts the positions of the male and female slave. So they specifically say this system will never be broken. We will constantly be fighting each other, blaming each other, being a masculine woman and a feminine male, a male not protecting a woman, which is what that means, and a woman being on top and taking care of herself, unless the woman and the man realize that and reverse the roles. They knew that was the only way that they were going to get beat. It says we show what we mean by example, and then it goes into the nigger marriage and a lot of other things. So I'm not going to go any more into that. This book, like I said, we could do a whole thing on. But I'm going to move on because I have some other really good pieces of information to show you, and this was just one. So we're going into asking, why aren't we protected? Okay? We're not protected first and foremost because in 1712, our slave masters were already coming up with ways to break us for generations to come. So while we are sitting here thinking of 5-year plans, 10-year plans, even 20-year plans, our oppressors are thinking 3, 4, 5 generations in advance. Okay, and he actually goes into that book and says, if you, and I might even quote it, where he says it, if you use this plan, it would perpetuate it for over 300 years. He actually says that. Yeah, he says it right here in the beginning. He says, I guarantee every one of you, if you install correctly, it will control your slaves and their mentality for at least 300 years, which would make the year 2012. So I mean, he was pretty spot on with that, because here we are 2020 and we still wondering. So I mean, not only was he spot on, but he was successful because it went well past 300 years. We're still under the Willie Lynch system, and we're still fighting each other, trying to find out who should protect us and blaming each other for not being protected. So now that we heard Willie, let's go into a woman, because why not? We got the male perspective, now let's get the woman perspective. And of course it's going to be the white women because they were the ones ruling us. And as we heard in Willie Lynch, use your wives, your children, and all your overseers to implement this. So a woman, a Jewish woman by the name of, her name is Helen Adelin. Helen Adelin. And I'm going to show you, I'm actually going to use my other phone here to show you some of this. Helen Adelin wrote a book called The Lost Art of Femininity back in 1941. So now we've seen the official documents from 1712, and now you have 1941, almost 200, a little bit over 200 years later or so, a white Jewish woman, and this is now in our recent history, not only discussing this same topic, but perpetuating it. And this is a picture. If anybody wants this article, because this is really deep as well, I have no problem sending it. Please, if you're live on this video, or if you're seeing it after, and you just, hey Tori, what's that? I have no problem sending it. Hit me up. So this is the Lost Art of Femininity by Helen Adelin. And she was 21 when she wrote this. She was 21. It says 21 in 1941. And she just has a quick, this is gonna be really short. It's a really long paragraph, but she just says really shortly, femininity is a gentle, tender quality found in a woman's appearance, manner, and nature. A feminine woman gives the impression of softness and delicateness. She is a spirit of sweet submission. This is a word that we don't talk about very much anymore, but we need to. We're going to start. I'm going to start. She has a spirit of sweet submission and dependency on her man for their care and protection. There's that word again that we said, right? Nothing about her seems masculine. No male aggressiveness, competence, efficiencies, fearlessness, strength, or the ability to kill her own snakes. That's straight out of Helen's mouth, okay? She goes on to say, femininity is based on a woman making her husband, children, and home a priority first. Now today we would say that's crazy. We have jobs, we have this, we have that. Not all of us want to get married, not all of us want to have kids. But we have to understand what the original definition of the word femininity was, and what's the word I want to use? What it was an example of. Like we saw in the Willie Lynch letters, femininity was a natural state. Protection was a natural state. Men were dependable and women were dependent on them. So we had to think about our husbands. We had to think about our families. We were not thinking about jobs. That was our natural state. Okay? So in our natural state, her self-sacrifice is the way of the world. So this woman, Helen, was actually a Satanist. And she actually goes on to say that a femininity is based on a woman's husband, children, and a priority first. Her self-sacrifice is the way that she loves and comes into the world. So as a Satanist, the Satanists taught women to seek fulfillment in their career instead. Okay, so I'm showing you guys this because this is not my words. And this is not my opinion. And this is something that, as a religion, because Satanists say they're a religion, thought they needed to implement. And these people who were in authority thought they needed to implement that the woman look at her career as a fulfillment and not her family. So we have another example of reversal of role, because originally the career was for a man, because he has, as we saw in the beginning, to make a financial protection, correct? So now we have turned the woman into thinking her priority is not women, children, and home. Her priority is fulfillment in her career by Satanists. Not by politics, not by logic, not by I want to, by a negative, if you will, connotation. And this is actually the Satanist protocol. I just want to show you because I'm going to read it word for word, but I want you to see that it's coming from this document. And it says, by cultivating in all a sense of self-importance in the woman, we shall destroy amongst the goyim. Now, I don't know if you guys know what that word goyim means. Anybody who doesn't know me, if you're seeing this for the first time, I am a Hebrew Israelite woman and I do speak Hebrew. Goyim is a Yiddish word. Yiddish is the language that Jewish people speak. They do not speak Hebrew. They were actually sued in the world court and lost for calling their language Hebrew. It is not Hebrew. It is Yiddish. It is a collection of a European dialect of German, Polish, and I think it's one other European language that they put together. But that is what they speak, and that's Yiddish. It's not Hebrew. They've been sued for using that word, okay? And they've lost in the world court. You can look that up yourself and find that. So in the Yiddish, the Jewish woman writes here, this is what she wrote. We shall destroy amongst the Goyim. Now I'm going to explain to you what that word means because I actually do speak Yiddish and Hebrew. And Goyim is what Jewish people call everyone that is not Jewish. Would you like to know what that means? It means cattle. They call you cattle. Literally, herd. They think of you as animals. So while you're sitting here bigging them up, why us as other nations are putting money into their economy, whether it's movies, whatever they do, because they own everything, they look at you as cattle. They specifically call you goyim to your face, and you don't even know what that word means. So that's something that you people need to actually look into. And if I'm lying, ask any of them what it means. Ask them what a goyim is, and see if they'll tell you. So it says, by cultivating in the sense of self-importance, we shall destroy amongst the goyim the importance of family and its educational value. In this way, we will create a blind, mighty force which will never be in position to move in direction without the guidance of our agents. And isn't that true right now? Don't we look at the Jewish people as they run the world? Don't we look at it as we need to go to them for everything because they're in legislature, they are in power. If you say something, they say anti-Semitic and you have to apologize. So they knew that they would perpetually do this to us, and by blind force, you wouldn't know where to look. Okay? So we have that in writing. Since we got some people that just came in, I'm going to reread that part. Okay? So the Jewish woman in 1940 said, by Satanist culture, we are going to make the woman be fulfilled in careers instead of her home. This was their plan. By cultivating in a sense of self-importance, we will destroy amongst the goyim, the cattle, the importance of family and educational system. Now, when we look at white families or Jewish families or families of other nations, whether it be Asian, whether it be East Indian, we see male and female family, right? We see a father and a mother constantly present. We're the only community in which we constantly see just a single woman. Why is that? It's because they destroyed the goyim, the cattle, us. Okay? So I can send anybody that. It extends, it really goes into detail. It goes right with that Willie Lynch book that we were seeing earlier that talked about breaking the black women against the black male, the old against the young, the light against the dark, and only trusting the white man. So we have two sources now between Helen in 1941 and Willie Lynch himself in 1712 saying the same thing. Now the last thing I want to show you guys is a really quick video. It's about 3 minutes. It's a little bit longer actually, but I'm only going to show you 3 minutes of the video. It's called the Mouse Utopia experiment. This was actually done by a doctor named John Calhoun. And he actually was the head of the National Institution of Health in America in the early 60s, 50s and 60s. So he ran, again, the National Institution of Health. He implemented what we look at as socialistic structures of how we would be healthy in communities, what it looks like to be in a small community, a large community. And he did a study, what I'm going to show you, which is called the Mouse Utopia experiment. And in this experiment, the point of this experiment, to be honest, was where we get our public housing system from. And I might go back just a few minutes so you can see that. But the point of this, what I'm showing you, is how the black male and how the black women are going to be used as an experiment. But this actual experiment was because, as we know, this land in its original creation was spread out, and somewhere we got condensed into small cities. Now this small city idea, or big city idea rather, came from John Calhoun, because they were trying to discover what would happen if you put everybody kind of in a pack rat kind of system versus being spread out around the land. Because when people are spread out, they're harder to control. They're harder to find. So if you have an enemy and you don't want them to know you're looking for them, it's best to kind of have them where you can find them, right? So that's where the whole idea of our public housing system and our cities came from. If you look at Black Wall Street, as a lot of us hear about now, and a lot of other things in our past, where we have places like Israelite Hill, and things like that, where we did have our own communities that we built, they could not watch us. That's why those places were destroyed. Even in St. Louis, I think, was the biggest massacre, bigger than Black Wall Street. And we hear about Black Wall Street all the time, but we don't hear about the massacre in St. Louis. That was the biggest in American history. There's a reason for that, okay? So they didn't want us to be spread out. They wanted to keep us condensed in small cities. So they did this experiment to try to figure out, what would happen if we were all amongst each other, because there's that fear that we might unite, right? But it wasn't that big of a fear, because thanks to Willie Lynch, they had 300-year jump on breaking us mentally and putting us against each other. So I'm going to show you this, and in this mouse Utopia experiment, what he basically shows you is it's a curve. It goes from giving, and again, this is being given, just like our public health system, our welfare, our stimulus check. Okay, this is something we are dependent on rather than depending on ourselves. So by giving us security, he saw that, or giving these mice, because in this situation it was a mouse, giving us security, we would procreate to the point of crowding ourselves. And then when we get to a place of crowding ourselves, if they take away our resources, like we see today in COVID, where we have shortages in food and all types of things, that it would create a random, in their words, sense of aggression and violence against each other. So again, by giving us security, letting us procreate to the point of crowding ourselves, and then taking away our resources, what they realized in this experiment was that we would fight with each other, and that we would get to a place where we fought so much that it would exterminate us. So I'm going to go to the video, and I'm going to start from, what I'll do is I will start a little bit ahead so you could see the little box maze, because it's crazy. They literally put them in what is like a makeshift apartment building to make this happen. So I'll start from that part so you could see it, and then let you see how they make this experiment. And this experiment, they then realized, hey, we could use this on Black people. And this is exactly what they did. And they created a public housing system. That's why we don't own land. When we did in the 20s and 30s and 40s, what happened? Okay, we decided to take subsidized housing instead, because it was easier, because we were already mentally broken. So this is a result of being already mentally broken. I'm just going to turn my camera around and let you guys check this out.
Providing for a potential population of over 3,000 mice. Yet, in spite of ideal conditions,
I'm going to go back a little bit just so you can see.
he has recorded some of these observations.
This is Dr. John Calhoun. This is the apartment.
In 16-cell mouse habitat, utopian conditions of nutrition, comfort, and housing were provided for a potential population of over 3,000 mice. Yet, in spite of ideal conditions, the mouse population met with catastrophe. Individuals were kept track of by color markings on their fur. Factors which normally control population growth, such as predation by owls or cats, were eliminated. Transmissible disease was also reduced. In effect, the mouse universe simulated the present situation of a continually expanding population of humans.
So like what she's saying, they noticed that this simulated the same type of situation that we would have in our human system. So I'm just gonna fast forward a little bit so you could see very quickly what happened when they decided to implement this. And when we were in public housing, and the idea of us breaking ourselves down from within and then looking for outside help and the white authority took place. So I'm going to let this play for about 3 minutes and we'll stop it.
This was a period of adjustment. Territories were established and nests were made. The next period lasted about 250 days.
You know what?
The population was among
I'm going to turn on my speaker. Give me 1 second. Turn the speaker on. That might make it better, so you can hear it a little bit better. I'm going to turn that. I just turned the speaker on, so just give it a second.
More food and water was consumed in some areas. As the population increased, most mice associated eating and drinking with the presence of others, and crowding developed in certain units. The third period, consisting of 300 days, found the population of mice leveling off. This was called the equilibrium period. Dr. Calhoun noticed that the newer generations of young were inhibited, since most space was already socially defined. At this time, some unusual behavior became noticeable. Violence became prevalent. Excess males strived for acceptance, were rejected, and withdrew. Huddling together, they would exhibit brief flurries of violence among themselves. The effects of violence became increasingly visible. Certain individuals became targets of repeated attacks. These individuals would have badly chewed and scarred tails. Other young mice growing into adulthood exhibited an even different type of behavior. Dr. Calhoun called these individuals the beautiful ones. Their time was devoted solely to grooming, eating, and sleeping. They never involved themselves with others, engaged in sex, nor would they fight. All appeared as a beautiful exhibit of the species, with keen, alert eyes and a healthy, well-kept body. These mice, however, could not cope with unusual stimuli. Though they looked inquisitive, they were, in fact, very stupid. Dr. Calhoun called the last period the die phase, leading the population into extinction. Although the mouse Utopia could house 3,000, the population began to decline in 2200. In the shift from the equilibrium to the die phase, each animal became less aware of associates, despite all animals being pushed closer together. Dr. Calhoun concluded that the mice could not effectively deal with the repeated contact of so many individuals. The evidence of violence increased to the point where most individuals had had their tails bitten to some degree. Eventually, the entire mouse population perished. Dr. Calhoun's experiment is a classic example of the typical population and its growth when left unchecked. Research in this area continues.
So basically what we just saw in that video from Dr. John Calhoun was that they realized when they put people in a small condensed area or an area close together where we're not spread out, living in either stacked buildings or tight communities, that we would continue to reproduce and overpopulate. By doing that, when we got to a certain number, they realized that if they took away the resources, it would create not only a sense of aggression, but random, is what they considered, random acts of violence and selfishness. So there was also one more thing that they said at that end of that sentence, and I don't know if you guys caught that, and I actually wrote it down here because I thought it was really interesting. What they were saying was when they realized, so where I had just left off, I was just showing, this is again on the topic of black women being unprotected. In that first hour, I had showed the Willie Lynch letters. And again, this is a slave owner, plantation owner from 1712, who was the cornerstone of the foundation of how slavery, not only physically but mentally, was implemented into America. In 1712, on December 25th, at the James River in Virginia, he delivered a letter addressing the colonies and teaching them his methods, and not the methods that he came up with himself, because he actually says they're both old and new, used from ancient Rome, Egypt, Mitzrayim, and to now. He showed the American slave owners how to implement these policies, control their slaves, not only physically, but mentally for generations to come. The reason that this book was important and why we showed it in the first hour is because in it, he not only says that this will be a perpetual failure to these people for 300 years plus, if successful, which it is, and that it would destroy male against female, female against male, light skin against dark, all these things. So all the things that we see in our community, where we talk about not being protected, whether it's a male or a female, whether it's your light skin, your dark skin, whether it's man fighting against older man, woman fighting against younger woman, the competitiveness, the cattiness, all these things that we see in our community came from this. So in that first hour, we dove completely into how Willie Lynch was a cornerstone in putting black man against black woman and perpetuating it for years to come. Then we went into Helen Adelin? Yes, Helen Adelin is her last name, which was a Jewish woman in 1941 who corroborated everything that Willie Lynch said. So we have a woman and a man, both of white authority, over 300 years, telling us what this generation would be like, and that they would both be man against woman, young against old, light against dark, fighting with each other in their own community and not looking outward. So this is where, and for people that didn't see that, the whole subject of protection and breaking down the protective state of a black male and the bringing up the independence of a black woman all comes from that. So all of these issues, if we keep pointing each other, we need to stop pointing fingers at each other, take accountability in the roles that we've played, and how we can, like the book said, beat them by reversing the system, because they even admit that's the only way it can be beat. So now that we've seen that from 1712 to literally 1941 to the last video that we watched on the mouse and housing experiment, and how we then became aggressive and killing each other. And they actually go into saying the young ones, and it said that at the end of that video, the young ones that they considered the beautiful ones, because they were overcrowded and gained a selfishness and self-preservation through the inherent traditions of the parents that were teaching them this now and that were putting this into their children, as we saw in the Willie Lynch letters. It made a generation that they referred to, Dr. Calhoun referred to as the beautiful ones. And the beautiful ones, in his words, I'm just repeating what the video said for anybody that's just coming in, the beautiful ones only groomed themselves, eat, and slept. It also said they were perpetually stupid. Okay, so they were alone. It said they didn't have any sexual reproduction. So we see that even now. So what they saw in those mice, we see now. We see that this generation is concerned about their looks, about advancing their own self-preservation. There's very little want or desire to reproduce at a young age, thus depopulating us on our own without even having anyone come in and depopulate us. But it also leaves us stupid. So this was all a study that we saw under the Mouse Utopia experiment and how they brought us into the housing system. So from 1712 to 1960 something, over 300 years, they implemented these processes in our community. And we just continue to fight with each other, falling for it every time. falling for it every time. So I'm not going to tell you guys all this stuff and give you all this information and then not come from a place of how we're going to restore, right? Because that's the whole point to this. We can't bring out all these roots and then not know how to plant the soil back in correctly. Plant it back in the soil correctly, excuse me. So the things that would restore the community, as we saw in the book, were things we already know. The problem is we tend to, in our current state, look at the white authority, which is the head right now, for the resources. For instance, Ice Cube just recently came out with something called the Black Contract or something like that, the Black Contract of America. And I did take a look at it, and there's actually some really good things in there that talk about our own reform, our own police system, judicial system, banks, all types of things that would help us build our community. And that's the first and foremost, because as we saw in the beginning, protection comes from being able to shield yourself and then have finances to shield yourself. So if we're, one, restoring our male back to their dependent state, becoming the letting him become the dependable one and you be dependent on him as the female, and we restore each other back to our dependent states, then we then take the next step of the book and then implementing it into our community and building our own community. Now, the only thing I will say that I do disagree with Ice Cube is I disagree that we need to look at legislative to do it for us. Because that goes right back into the same cycle that they put us in of going to them, just like in the Helen letter, where she refers to us as Goyim and says that we have to go to them to fix our problems. So we're constantly saying, these are our problems, this is what we need, then we go to them to get it fixed. If we know what our problems are and we know what we need, then we need to fix them ourselves. And stop going to them to fix them for us. If we can come up with a 10-page contract or however long it is, and this is not to say anything against what Ice Cube is doing, because I think it's amazing what he's doing. At least he's doing something. But instead of then taking that plan to the white man to do it for us, the one that oppressed us, the one that didn't ever care what we felt from the beginning, why would they care now? You know, this is the silliest thing where we want to be protected from we want to be protected by our oppressors, which is so. Anyway, but instead of going to legislator to pass it for us because we don't feel like we have that knowledge, we need to educate ourselves on that knowledge so we can do it ourselves. So restoration in our men, bringing them back to being the leaders of the community, that is literally the most important part. Because like I said in the beginning, if the women are ruling the world and the women are having the jobs and the women are getting the political status, then you can't turn to the man and say it's his fault that we're in this state because they didn't protect you. If he's going to protect you, he needs to be in charge. And if he's in charge, then you need to be able to submit. And submission does not mean control. Submission means understanding that this person has the authoritative role will make the right decisions for your preservation, for your exposure. So you're taking care of all those words that we said meant protection. So we allow the man to do that, then he can protect us. But if we stay in this frozen state of perpetual independence and security, where are we giving him the room to protect us? Where? It has to start somewhere. As women, we need to take a step back. We need to allow the man to be a man, and we need to be the woman. And then as he feels like he's the man and starts to feel mentally strong and not physically strong, he will then mentally protect you. He will then mentally not only have self-preservation, because right now he doesn't even have self-preservation. Right now it's YOLO. Okay? So not only will he have self-preservation, but he'll preserve you. And then just naturally, if a woman is being protected, she's going to give you all those love and cooking and cleaning and all those things that you say she doesn't do. So very naturally, these things can happen if we return to our original roles and state and function as a male and a female. And if we stop looking at each other as the problem in our community and start looking at each other to build, when we do that, then we can take things like the black contract and take our money, and then we could have our own policing system, our own bank system, and protect from outside forces rather than call outside forces to protect us. Then we won't be shot by our men and then asking for protection by our men. And I'm not saying that to say anybody deserved it, because I know where you guys are going and thinking what I meant by that. But what I meant is if we have that persona that we are the independent, don't need a whatever hot girl summer, or whatever independent single woman, or whatever city girl, it don't even matter who it is. It doesn't matter who it is. If we keep perpetuating that stereotypical image of I make $100,000, I don't need a man, I don't need a cook or clean to get a ring, then you're going to constantly be alone. And then when you're looking to be protected, there's going to be no one to protect you. And then we can't then look at the man and say, you didn't protect me because you didn't need me. You didn't need me. Not only that, he's not protected. And he's being killed. So we're letting our black men get killed, and then we're saying that they're not protecting us. So there needs to be a discussion amongst us as a people about what our roles are as women, how to submit to be protected, how to exalt our men to a level where they can protect us before we point the blame at each other. And then we need to go and research Willie, Lynch, Adelin, and the mouse Utopia experiment to understand how all those things happened to our forefathers to begin with. So when we come from a place of knowledge and we come from understanding our past, then we can restore our future. Shalom.